What's up, otakus? It's your tour guide here. It's Saturday night, and my family, my wife, and my son are getting back tomorrow. They're flying in from Tokyo. In fact, they're probably at the airport right now, and they're probably on the plane as we speak. Or they're about to get on the plane, and yeah, I'm excited. It's been 3 months. They've been gone 3 months. But they had a blast in Japan, and that's really all that matters. You know, it's really hard for my wife to be away from her family. Um, living here in the U.S., she has a good community here. We have a lot of good friends and stuff, but of course, nothing compared to the life we left in Japan. Um, I was there 3 years, uh, and it was the best 3 years of my life. Just Japan is such an amazing place. But again, she has, her entire life. She left her entire life out there to move here to the U.S. So I'm very thankful she made that decision to be with me and, being here in the U.S. Um, but, she gets to go out once a year. We try to save around everything so that they can travel and be there during the summer. Now I don't know how you know how much that can continue into the future because once Leo starts school and he's going to be doing a lot of like summer activities here in the U.S. I'm sure academic stuff, and but we want him to visit his family and maintain his roots. So it's just got to be a balancing act. But for now, um, Leo summers, you know, for the foreseeable future will be spent in Japan. Um, my wife and I both want that for him. And he had a blast. You know, one of the things he's really into race cars, and we watch. Um, I mean, we don't try to watch too many videos because I don't want him to start getting addicted to like social media and videos and stuff. Um, but we do, so I do let him watch Speed Racer, the original Japanese version of Speed Racer. They've got like, I think season one uploaded on YouTube. So, we'll watch that. And he loves Speed Racer. I think the animation is pretty safe for kids. And it really, there's it's a good story oftentimes in terms of that animated series, especially given its when it was released, it was a series from the 60s. So and of course the car is super. The Mach 5 is probably the coolest sports car. So in honor of him coming back, I just spent some time building this Lego Mach 5 for Leo. I mean, it's obviously a different design than the Mach 5, but I just wanted to kind of add like a race car slash element. You know, try to keep the M design here on the Mach 5, but it looks more like an Indy car actually, but kind of cool. I think it looks cool, and I think he'll like it. So I'm going to take that to the airport with me. Just give it to him when he gets back. I'm sure he'll like it. All right. Well, this is probably going to be, as I mentioned, um, we're taking a step back from comics. We're not going to buy as much. Probably just not buy comics. I'm just going to kind of cut the cord on the obsession with comic book collecting for a little bit. And now, you know me, I love this hobby. I love comic book collecting, and I love all of that. But it's going to be more of a, more of a side, long term side enjoyment thing. Um, I'm really probably looking forward to just retirement, which I anticipate will happen in about 20 years. So I'm just going to hold up, kind of get out of collecting again. We got out of collecting in 97 and didn't come back to it for, almost 25 years. Well, a little less than 25 years. Got out of it for about 20 some years. And we're kind of doing the same thing this time around. We got back into it. We did a lot of comic book buying. And my collection is I think at a good point. I like where it's at right now. So that's something to look forward to. I think just retirement. I can kind of, with all the time and I guess a little extra income that I have, we can just enjoy picking up books here and there. And of course, I'll be super focused on picking up books from my era, which is the Copper Age in the 90s. So, yeah, just that's kind of the plan. Just taking a step back. I'm sure we'll pick up a book or two here and there. And we'll continue to hit Comic Cons, although I don't know exactly what kind of budget I'll reserve. But, if Jim Lee's in town, we definitely want to get books signed and spend on that. But outside of that, I don't think we're going to. If like Jim Lee's not coming, Mark Silvestri, people that I really admire aren't there necessarily, then we probably won't be so actively in pursuit of attending. All right, which brings us to the point of this video. I am going to share the top 10 artists that I collect. These are my top 10 artists. And this list, it's pretty static, but it does change and evolve over time. And I think the last time I put out this video, it might have been like this past winter, or maybe even the fall winter during that interval. I revealed who my top 10 artists were, what we were planning to pick up from those artists. And I think confidently say we've picked up all the books that we set out to pick up. Like the next books that we're targeting by that artist. I think I've picked them all up, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to go back and watch that old video, but from my understanding is the ones we were targeting to pick up, we pretty much picked up. So I'm not going to go do that this time around. We're just going to go straight through the list. And again, it's updated. As we go through the list, I guess I'll touch upon which artists sort of moved up and down, and which artist is off the list now. And there is one artist, notable artist, who's off the list, and we'll get into who that is and why I chose to, remove that particular artist from the list. But yeah, before we continue, I just know that I'm drinking wine. I've had a few beers and I'm drinking wine, so it's a good time Saturday night. Just want to get to bed kind of early and get an early start on tomorrow when I go to the airport and pick up my wife. So it's, this is going to be probably the last video. I mean, I'm going to do shorts and I'm going to try to do the weekly top 10 trending list that I've been doing. I'm going to try to keep that consistent. But for the most part, again, I'm taking a big step back from comics. That'll entail also a big step back from the channel, unfortunately. Um, and well, we'll see. It's really a time management thing, but if I can manage a video or two, maybe come up with a more consistent schedule where I'm dedicating a specific amount of time to doing videos or talking about something. But that's pretty much where we're at. So this will probably be the last comic book related sort of content where I'm live and I'm, talking about books that I'll do for a while. All right, so number 10 on my list. I have the list written down here, so we can kind of be organized. Number 10 on my list is, I think this particular artist dropped down on the rankings. And don't get me wrong, I love this artist. It's just some other artists, I feel like I just have more, more of a connection with their work than this particular artist. So there was some, again, reworking, re-ranking. And again, one artist has moved out of the top 10. But we'll start with number 10. And again, I'm going to show off the top 10 artists with the book, my favorite book or my favorite piece of art by the artist. Probably the representative work by the artist in my collection. And that's what I'm going to show off. Okay, so I'm going to show off 10 books, 10 artists. So number 10 is Mike Zeck. I mentioned before, I think I mentioned in a previous video that Mike Zeck was the one that was kicked off the list. After reevaluating, he remains on the top 10 list, and he's number 10. And I have a lot of Mike Zeck books. He's actually, in terms of the quantity of books, I recently showed off some of the data. He's not number 10. He's much higher, or maybe he is number 10 in terms of quantity of books. But he's such a prolific artist in the 80s that because I collect the 80s, his presence just is difficult to avoid, especially if you're collecting Marvel in the 80s. But this is the work. This is probably my most representative or favorite work by him in the collection, and that's Daredevil 241. This has Todd McFarlane on interiors, FYI, for you McFarlane collectors out there. But this one is not, I didn't get this cover because of the interior. I just got this cover because it's just a badass cover there. Daredevil sending out his sonar, looking out over the Hell's Kitchen. Just a beautiful look at the city backdrop there. Look at that. Such an amazing cover, and then I just love the pose. Just love this work. Now, Mike Zeck artwork, it ranges. It can range, and you can tell the covers and where he's sort of just trying to meet a deadline and kind of just, and that's how talented he is. I mean, he can just kind of put out a cover, I think, at will, right? He can just kind of dedicate some time, sketch something, and have really something that's cover quality that goes out. But that quality ranges. You can tell, hey, Damien, what's up? Thanks for joining. I hope you're doing well, sir. How's everything down in Portland? Hope hasn't been too hot down there. It's been a rather cool summer, I feel like, in the Pacific Northwest. We had maybe a couple days in the 90s, but for the most part, it's been like mid 80s, uh, mid 70s, mid 80s throughout the summer. So it's been fairly mild. When I look at what other people around the country are going through in terms of heat waves and stuff, I feel very fortunate to be here in the Seattle area. But I know Oregon's a little warmer, so hopefully you didn't have too much of a hotter summer. But hope you're staying cool. Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. It hasn't been so humid up here. Again, it's been rather cool and dry. Not too much humidity. But again, Oregon is different. Oregon, I think, has been a little warmer. That's what I've been hearing. Wow, 30 reader copies. What was your best pickup among the 30? I know you probably picked up a bunch of Conan. I know you're picking up that Conan Conan the Barbarian, the original series, and also I think you're picking up Conan the magazine as well. Well, I hope you're close to completing the run. All right, I'm going to get back to the list again. Number 10 on the list is Mike Zeck, and this is Daredevil 241. Just a beautiful cover by Zeck. My favorite, again, my favorite piece by Zeck in the collection. Moving on to number 9. Number 9 is new to the list, and or actually, no, number 9 is not new to the list. Sorry, excuse me. Okay, cool. Conan, Superman. I love it. I love it. Superman. Okay, the black and white. This is the Conan. Trying to. It's the larger format, the larger size format, right? Yeah, like a lot of these artists haven't been doing much in the industry as of late, but hopefully that'll change. Hopefully they'll come back and finish out their legacies on a strong note. That's what I loved about Neil Adams. Neil Adams was um, continued to do stuff for Marvel and DC. It was great to see, uh, and so I think everybody in the industry, when you reach a certain level of you know kind of status, um, the DC and Marvel and all the publishers, if you want to do something with them, they're more than happy to oblige, and that was what was that the situation with Mr. Adams, and I'm sure a lot of I think Todd McFarlane right now he's doing not too much. He's doing not too much outside of his own image, Spawn books. But hopefully that'll change. Hopefully he'll get that invitation from like Marvel or even DC, right, to go to do Batman again. I could definitely see like Jim Lee reaching out to him, say, "Hey, you want to do a run on Batman?" And Todd really, with everything he's kind of picked up over the years, to have a seasoned Todd on a new Batman run, that would be amazing. And we kind of got an inkling of that with Spawn Batman. That was nice to see that he came back. Actually, Capullo did that. Excuse me. Uh, McFarlane just did the writing, but my point is like hopefully we get to see more of these artists. Silvestri, is on Batman. He's doing Batman. So um, again, nice to see the legends from my period coming back and finishing up their legacy strong. All right, so speaking of Silvestri, number 9 on my list is Mark Silvestri. And I have so many definitive Silvestri covers and works. Savage Sword of Conan. That's what you're collecting. Yeah, a Zick Batman would be nice. Yeah. So Silvestri, there's so many definitive works of Silvestri that I could really just bring on and show off on this list. Pretty much everything he puts out is just it's awesome. But I got to go with this particular book, this selection. One, because this was around the time when I was just like obsessed and in love with Silvestri's work. Obviously, that it blossomed during X-Men. It blossomed even more during the Wolverine series. But I think during the whole Image, that transition, anybody collecting in the 90s was like an Image fan, right? Like here were these like rock stars of comic books. They were like the Mount Rushmore of artists at the time, and the fact that they were just putting out such an eclectic selection of books at Image, all of them, doing the first-hand creatives on their respective titles, just made you want to pick up everything. I mean, even the tertiary stuff I was collecting, like stuff that they weren't even working on, um, just you kind of just got swept up in the Image. So I spent a lot of money on pretty much garbage. It's not worth much now, but that was where the focus of the collection was at the time. Eh, in hindsight, if I could go back in time and use those resources at the LCS in a more productive manner, I probably would have been picking up more Silver Age, Bronze Age stuff. But in hindsight, you just want to pick up the books that are coming out, the books that you're reading, the contemporary artists that you're into. So I get why the collectors now are into like things like Something is Killing the Children, the artists of the current contemporary period. I get that's what you want to collect. So, um, but as you kind of develop as a hobbyist, I think you'll more and more kind of reach back into the what's nostalgic for you. So, what you're collecting now, 20 years from now, you'll be nostalgic for. So, um, but anyway, this is something I got signed by Silvestri back in the early 90s when this book came out. Um, and I got it signed by uh, Matt the Banning and Mark Silvestri. They were there at the comic shop, the local LCS where I was attending school, um, doing a signing event. And they were specifically promoting this Spawn book, which had come out. This isn't a variant cover. This is actually a Spawn book that Silvestri and Banning did as sort of a guest cameo on the title. And that's Spawn 25. And I just love the colors. Now, I can't confirm whether or not this was they used like digital rendering to get these colors and this effect, whether they were using digital techniques or computer, um, you know like they were using computer generated um, effects to achieve the color and all that. But it definitely, like, at the time, blew away anything that Marvel or DC was doing in terms of like paper quality and just the color and the effect. Um, this was just pretty much at the time the most technologically advanced artwork on a book. And you'll see what I mean. This is Spawn 25. This is the Mark Silvestri cover on Spawn. And I don't know if you can get a good look here, but the color really just pops. I mean, the lightning looks like real light. There you go. You got a good view right there. Um, all the shading, all the colors. It's just a work, a masterpiece, a work of art. Absolutely um, a fine piece of art. Now, again, I got this book at the LCS while they were doing the signing, so having picked up a copy, there wasn't much of a big line, so I kind of got to them, uh, and I think I forgot what I asked or the conversation I had with Mark, but I think I ended up saying like I'm a big fan of yours, and um, I loved your work on X-Men, and just remember just kind of being a complete like nerd and geek fan, just kind of fawning over him and just telling him like what a big fanboy I was of his. And he was just great. He said thanks and signed my book. And again, they both signed the book. Um, Banning signed it right here, and then Silvestri signed his in gold. And he has a wispy signature. I don't know if you can probably see right there. You can see it right there. There, that's his signature right there in gold. But I just love this cover. Again, not all image books are this colorful and graphic in terms of that lightning effect, all the the background lighting, the foreground lighting, on the color, that like the transition from like blues to reds. It's just incredible to look at. And I've kept this just so well preserved over the years. It's really high grade, and yeah, um, just a reminder of how much I love Silvestri's work. Now, this is an interesting thing. Silvestri comes on Todd's book and does this cover, and I think around a couple months later, within the year, Todd returns the favor and he does a cover for Cyberforce. I think it's Cyberforce number 7 or 8. It's a pink cover, but it's basically Ripclaw on a building in the same kind of pose. There's no lightning or anything. It's a little different in tone, but it's pretty much an homage to this cover, but on Cyberforce. I have that book. I'm just not gonna dig it up, but that's an FYI. So if you guys are into like twin covers or homage covers, that's just a really good. It just goes to show you the kind of relationship these guys were all friends. They're obviously business partners, but that business partnership, I think, um, was like underlying that business partnership was a deep friendship. Um, and you really get that sense when you see them doing their public engagements together. Obviously, they're not going to be like the best of buddies. They each have their own um, projects and careers, but they come together at the Comic Cons and they give the fans what they want, and and you can really see that bond, that collegial bond, that friendship that was there, 30 years ago. Um, it remains intact, and it's there, on a very human level. So what I love about this period is that these guys, they revolutionized comic books, but they also remained kind of true to each other, and um, they didn't let their egos or business impact those relationships. So that's kind of nice to see. All right, so number 8 on the list, and now this is a new addition to the list, and this artist, I kind of mentioned my arc with this artist. I didn't have the best first impression of the artist, but of course I was like 14 at the time, 14 or 15 at the time when I first uh, had exposure to this artist's work. And again, I was immature. I just didn't. I had a different eye back then, and I was mentioning, like my eye back then would gravitate more toward like a Liefeld or a McFarlane that was doing just all this like just kind of in your face action poses, weapons, all the accessories, all these kinds of like things that you as a 14 or 15-year-old found really cool. But now that I've matured and, like I appreciate like fine art and like just modern art, when I look at the comic book artists and the contextual, uh, the work of an artist in the context of like modern art and comic book art, this artist, what I didn't see in my youth, I recognize now that this artist was an absolute uh, master of the medium, but just an amazing um, artist, an amazing sketch artist. Um, and that's Brian Bolland. Bolland is 8 on my list. And he kind of moved up. He went all the way from kind of not being on my radar to like entering my radar this summer and just shooting up to number 8. And he may go higher when it's all said and done. But for now, like I definitely, if I get any kind of budget and I have any kind of bandwidth to pick up books and stuff, we're definitely picking up more Bolland art. And the one I want to, and this is my favorite pickup from the summer by Bolland. It's a mullet Superman with a mullet. It's a beautiful Wonder Woman, them posing together, and yeah, I've got the DC logo to boot. So this is a pretty cool book. I just love the art again. Um, it's so 90s. I mean, nothing screams 90s like this cover here right now. But yeah, I just wish I had. I just wish I had that appreciation back when I was collecting, to have recognized that this is something I should have picked more of, or read more of. So that's cool. Well, I guess it's better late than never, right? So um, the fact that I'm focused on it now is good. Um, all right, so next on the list, number 7. Number 7 is an artist that, like Bolland, you can use the same adjectives, superlatives, except Turner came much later. Turner came when I got out of comic books. I guess had he been working when I was collecting, I might have had the same uh, attitudes toward Turner's art that I had toward Bolland's, which is really just a sort of an untrained eye on what comic book art should like uh, what determined or designated an artist as a master or just somebody who's extremely talented in the medium. And yeah, had Turner been drawing during this whole image era phase, I probably wouldn't have gravitated toward his work. Uh, but you know, now, much like Ballin's work, I definitely would have. I mean, it's some of the best work I think in comic books, and in terms of his just sheer talent, it's on display in every piece of work he has put out, and he has such. I mean, Bolland and Turner, they have such definitive signature styles. I mean, you can tell a Bolland cover right off the bat. Not so much evident with Silvestri on certain. I mean, Silvestri on certain covers you can tell it's Silvestri. Um, Zek not so much. Zek is kind of like uh, you know like you can see kind of hints of Zek, but it's nothing signature about what like Silvestri and Zek do that kind of like makes their work stand out. But for Bolland and for Turner, definitely like you just can't. There's no escaping what these two bring to the page, and yeah, this is my favorite sort of cover by Turner in the collection. Um, Superman in outer space and doing his patrol with such. I mean, I don't know if you can tell through the camera, but there's so many subtle, and maybe this is more of a attributable to the colorist on this book, but there's so many like layers of colors in the backdrop, and then you just have all this amazing line work and shading and movement. Oh man, it's just amazing, amazing. All right, so number 7. Now, like I tend to sound like a broken record from this point on because from this, like the top 10, all these artists are extremely talented. So just to harp on how talented they are is just redundancy at this point. But I can honestly say this next artist, she, in terms of what she does and how fluid and easy she makes sketching and putting something on paper look, um, is quite remarkable. I, you know, if you compare this next artist to like Jim Lee, for example, Jim Lee, he spends a lot of time on the sketch. Now he can do a fast, rough sketch with the best of them, but Jim's a perfectionist, and that's what I think. That's what makes all of any artist worth their salt uh, great is they perfect, they work a sketch, they rework, they they get it till the lines, the anatomy, the what they want to convey on the page comes out. And definitely Jim follows uh, that line of perfection and artistry. It's what makes him my favorite artist and what makes him stand out in terms of his talent. But um, it's in very stark contrast to what this artist does. This artist does it with such ease, and like she does it with such speed and ease, makes it look really easy, but what comes out on the page is absolutely masterful. And we're talking about Peach Momoko. Peach Momoko, um, hands down, I think the most talented artist, and that's saying a lot. And I know that's saying a lot, but when you look at what she does compared to what an Archer, compared to what like even a Dan Mora, who I think is an incredible artist in his own right, um, probably gonna be one of my future top 10 artists. He just needs to do more, but what he's done so far is just incredible. Um, but really, the I think today's contemporary artist is more has to be comfortable in the digital medium, um, or I should say, the team around that artist has to be comfortable in the digital medium. Whereas like Archer, he's already working in the digital medium. I can't confirm how what Mora's process is, but I assume he does this initial sketch. There's an inker and there's a colorist, and what comes out on the page is really polished through the digital techniques, through Photoshop, um, which is, I think, absolutely integral for today's comic book artists, because that's where the industry's at, right? People want uh, really flawless uh, art on their comic book pages, something that looks just very clean, has a myriad of colors and shading, and just creates that depth of realism. Um, and you can really, and like if you look at what Artgerm does, there's such when everything is like perfect with the shading, the lighting, and everything, it there's a hyper realism to it that's like, I think, you know, we're just in a very special age when it comes to digital rendering and what we see on screens and pages. But that's what makes Peach Momoko so much more of a standout. I mean, I'm sure she has all those, she can probably render things digitally and do all that, but she doesn't. Her medium is really just, you know, about as basic as it is. That she just takes a brush pen, okay, sketches. I think she does do like an initial sketch, but I've seen her do just straight on the page, no sketch, no reference, and just put out a work like this. But as you can see on this particular work, you can tell she was working off a sketch, and that she did it finished with the inks. Um, and this is Demon Days, the variant design variant of Psy. Really critical, I think, key first issue for her work. This is really her first ongoing comic book series, which is significant. But I mean, you can just see like so much detail in this design sketch. Um, and again, go and watch a video where she's um, doing like a sketch cover or something that she's going to put out for sale, and just watch her work. Um, I mean, she puts a good amount of time in it, but like you can tell, it's just like she's not worried about making mistakes, right? She kind of has the image in her mind, and then she puts it on paper, lets that thing dry, and then adds the colors, and it's incredible. The fact that she's using brushes, okay, like fine tip to like larger, like the brush sizes, and we're talking about brush pens, okay. Um, and then that she's using like watercolor to have these colors kind of bleed into the image and create this soft effect. Absolutely brilliant. Uh, I mean, if she ever did something in the digital medium, I think it really takes away from who she is as, like, it takes away from her talent. It's like, I think digital rendering is a crutch. Um, it's, I look at it as like, you can be a mediocre artist, but after the digital techniques, you can stand out as something more than you are, right? And maybe there's something to be said of the digital techniques and the medium itself, but for the most part, it is a form of artistry. It is a form of creativity, and a form of, um, like, you have to be a good artist to be able to utilize that those tools and mediums. But what I'm saying is, like, it's a crutch, right? It's not, you're not standing on your own merits. You're using tools to enhance your work. Whereas, you go back to the olden days, guys like Kirby, Adams, Swan, the legends. These guys were just, you know, pencil, pen, like markers, or like, inks, color markers, all these kinds of, like, this is what they were. It's the analog. It's the analog techniques, things that rely on sort of tangible materials, and real, like, tangible tools, as opposed to the digital stuff. So this is a long rant on why I think Peach Momoko is just, in a league by herself. Now, Peach Momoko in Japan, I've mentioned this many a time. I think she would also stand out in the Japanese manga scene, but there are so many, like, talented manga artists, like, on her level, if not better. Um, so really, we're just talking about in the context of American comic books. I think she stands out, like, heads above the rest. I guess I'm making a cultural statement saying, like, I think Japanese manga artists are technically uh, more talented than American comic book artists, because the 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 amount of detail and accuracy in the mundane things, like a building, like like just rendering a photograph on the comic book page to mimic exactly what it looks like in real life, like, in terms of shading, in terms of all the line work, having it mimic photograph, um, and them doing it in relative, like, amount of ease, and, like, that's the kind of advanced training that these, like, art institutes in Japan, the industry produces. So it's just a higher standard of the industry. Um, Now, don't get me wrong, American comic books are incredible and amazing to look at. But if you're talking about just technical skill of an artist, the average technical skill in Japan is much higher than the average technical skill of your average American artist. And it's just a cultural there's just a cultural difference there in terms of, you know how how the artists are developed, what age they start, what they're learning, and then the industry that supports those the top of the top creative artists. Peach Momoko, it she actually lucked out, because had she gone into the manga industry, I don't think she would have necessarily risen, or would have been recognized as something maybe special. She's obviously talented, right? She would have probably gained a career along some aspect. Probably not a manga. I really think she would have been more of a maybe a commercial artist, or maybe just like a niche modern artist. Um, like a fine artist. But the fact that she comes to the U.S. and her work is recognized as instantly unique, uh, you know, stylistic, everything like just setting. She just kind of sets herself apart. There's really no one who can adopt and mimic her style. Although people are trying now, it's just and she stands in a league by herself. And again, I think that it helps that she's this sort of cultural import phenom, if that you want to put it that way. But she kind of like made a name for herself here because she stood out. I don't think she stands out as much in the manga industry, and who knows if she would have had a career at all in manga had she pursued that in Japan. Um, but anyway, we are blessed to have her here in the U.S. doing these kinds of books, and I hope she actually opens the doors for many more manga artists to make that crossover, because I really feel like there's a lot of manga artists out there in Japan who could come here and have the same kinds of impacts that Peach has. There are definitely some very, very talented ones out there. I think where manga has a limitation is it tends to look like the way they do their characters. And this is what, again, separates Peach. She doesn't have a manga, she doesn't approach her art with a manga style face. If you look at the manga style face, with the big eyes, kind of the sort of the line, just the subtle line for the nose, and then the sort of the pointed chin, sort of big forehead. There's like a manga style face, and even in sometimes in the body work too, there's a manga style format to every character, and kind of looks like the same throughout. I mean, there's subtle differences with each artist, but overall, that medium, that manga medium, how they draw figures and faces and all that, it's quick, but it tends to kind of look synonymous. But again, Peach is a departure from that, and at the same time, she brings a little bit of that element here to her work, and it stands out in American. So whenever I hear somebody uh, who says Peach's art is a manga style, it is not manga style. This is so not manga style. Like, look at real manga style, and then compare Peach's work. Look at the face here. There's nothing manga about that face. That's totally Peach's own unique, uh, her unique style, and it's more Western than it is Japanese. Now, I can't. I mean, obviously, her the way she approaches the theme of her, like she uses a lot of Japanese, I think, folk themes in her work. But you see that changing now. You see her like trying to really adapt a lot of the American comic book kind of style to her work, which is great. But I think she's kind of lies in this, like she's bringing her Japanese like technical skills and artistry and sort of mindset, but she's working in the American medium. So you see that her kind of adapting and evolving as an artist, which is great to see. Anytime you have that, you're working with someone truly talented. All right, where are we? We're now on number 5. Number 5 on the list is George Perez, and George Perez is, again, just has such a body of work in comic books. It's worked on so many critically acclaimed big books throughout his career. I mean, hands down, he was the sort of the foundation of DC's during my collecting era. He was definitely like at the forefront of everything, novel DC was doing. And this is a good example of that. Crisis on Infinite Earths number 7. This is a beautiful Superman uh, classic cover. This was, is an homage to Detective Comics. I forget the issue, but I believe it's a Dick Dillon uh, cover. But correct me if I'm wrong. But anyway, for the for Demon Days, oh Marcus, you are so wrong on that, sir. But anyway, I mean you're entitled to opinion, but um, you got to understand, like she's just bringing Japanese folk, like a folk tale to life. So if you're expecting like some big cinematic, action piece, that's not what was. Yeah, that's not what she was going for. She's going for something historical, something folk related in that historical context. I think it's the Edo period. So you're not. I mean, it's just a muted story. So yeah, I mean, it's not going to be like your tip. I think in American comic books, you tend to want like multiple villains, some kind of like crisis event, something where they're trying to solve a mystery or like in the context of a lot of action and then like you combining a lot of elements, but really the binding arc of the story is action driven, right? Which I think any good comic book should be. It should be action driven. But again, it's a little different in tone. So I mean, yeah, you can kind of see it as muted, and so, but I look at that as actually a benefit rather than a than it's not everybody's cup of tea. And I think Peach Momoko is not everybody's cup of tea. Like, it's shit. I think um, some people might look at her art and be like, it's like too analog. I'd rather have an Archer or a Nakayama or something that just pops, has that realism effect, all the digital effects. That's fine. But for me, like, if basically, if you put artists in their medium, like you put a canvas in front of them and said, get to work, and you gave them an hour, and what they produced on that canvas is what you had at the end of the day, my money's on Peach. My money's on Peach. You could put the best artist. I'm talking about throughout history. You could put the best artist to that test. I mean, there's a few people that could, obviously some of them passed away, but there's a few artists that might might surpass Peach in that test, but um, there are a few that would be able to go up there with just a brush pen or a pen or a pencil on a blank canvas, and in an hour's time, you just say stop, whatever they have to go with. And if you're just judging based off that skill level, the ability to produce without making errors or mistakes, man, she's like I said, she's in a league by her own. There's just no one who can match her talent level, and that's documented. So I mean, that's just. I mean, you know, uh, I think there are a few artists like Ross. Alex Ross is one of those guys where you can, but there's like if you look at his preparation, like it's there's a layers of processes to his process, right? There's just a lot of prep work, and in terms of the painting itself, that's time consuming. So nothing to say that labor intensive, that quality is necessarily anything less of a reflection on him as an artist. He's obviously right there with all the contemporaries, but again, that it's that litany test of like, here's a blank piece of paper, here are some raw materials, nothing digital, just raw materials, get to work and let's see what you can produce in an hour. Peach would just blow everybody out of the water. It's just her process, right? It's just fluidity and ease for her. And obviously artists like and we're talking about greatness. Like Perez is just greatness, and his is more in line with, I think, what you see typically see in the industry is just a, good pencil work, and then a good supporting cast who can really bring out the sketch. Um, and some artists were like Byrne, uh, were talented enough to just do everything on their own. They didn't need these other people doing, enhancing or rendering their work. Um, of course, you don't want all Burns and Perez's in the industry, or otherwise you put people you don't have jobs. People are out of work. But yeah, if you had a bunch of like Peaches and uh, you know Perez's and a bunch of John Burns in the industry, no one would be working in the industry. So I think having that people with specific skill sets to come in and kind of work as a creative team and put out these great works is crucial. But at the same time, you got to recognize like the guys that can kind of like do it on their own. And I'll admit, Jim Lee's one of my favorite artists of all time, but he doesn't ink his stuff the best. And he's the first one to admit that. He knows like Williams brings so much value to his work. Alex Sinclair brings that added value to his work, and it really enhances the entire process. And so there are artists like that. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's great to see. Yeah, again, I think peach is not everybody's cup of tea, and it may be a cultural. I think it's a lot of it is a cultural sort of disconnect to her medium. Um, but if you are, I guess, a historian of East Asian art, if you look at Western art, the Western art is they they're from early on in the art medium. Western art has been built upon a hyper sense of realism. The fact that you're bringing the more you how you can use shading, how you can use color to bring about on a canvas. Again, oil is the medium, right? How you can bring about oil colors on a canvas to bring about that hyperreal. That's where the sort of the functionality of Western art evolved from, right? It's different in East Asian art. East Asian art hasn't changed. I mean, you look at contemporary East Asian, Chinese, Japanese, Korean artists, contemporary artists, they're still working in the same medium, and the Western artists as well, in the oil canvas medium, working the same medium as they were in East Asian art. And East Asian art has always been around the brush pens and inks, um, and watercolors. It's always been that medium. And so I think it's just there's just that cultural historical difference in how arts that what mediums that they've worked with. And that's again, I think that's what makes her fresh in American comics. The fact that she's working in her what she's comfortable with in terms of her medium as an artist, being Japanese, and it's also something few American artists can mimic. And so, in terms of contemporary artists, innovative contemporary artists, people who just are stand in a sort of a category all to themselves, that's definitely Peach. And I know what's missing for you. I know again, like I can probably guess who you're the mediums that you're the artists that you're focusing on, and it's really a cultural just preference. So uh, nothing wrong with that. I hear that all the time, but like when I have conversations about who people's favorite artists are, and then I bring up Peach, everybody says the exact same thing you just said, Marcus. It's like I think she just I don't know. I prefer like Wrightson, or I prefer like like people bring up these like the standard fare of like legends of the comic book industry, like Kirby, like I prefer these guys, and that's fair. I prefer those guys too. A lot of those guys are my favorite artists as well. Um, but I just appreciate her work on another level. I think, and definitely, I think her talent is just no one can really match what she's doing on the page. Uh, I think people are making the attempt now. I see a lot of artists, especially amateur artists, trying to mimic what she's doing with the brush pen and just having sort of being able to kind of flawlessly create something, not have to, sketch something over, erase and sketch something over till the lines are perfect. But again, that's just a testament to how much work you have to do to get to her level, right? Like if you want to, again, masters are masters for a reason, right? They they don't need an eraser at the end of the day. Jim Lee's a master, but he uses the eraser. He wants to get it perfect, and so it's just a contrast in styles. And Jim Lee, um, he's not East Asian. He's an I want to get across the point. Jim Lee's an American artist. Okay, he's trained in American medium. He was influenced and trained in the Western comic book medium. I mean, he grew up looking at, you know, uh, he grew up looking at the Kirby's, the Burns, the Zeks of the world. So um, that I just want you to know he has nothing to do with East Asia. So he doesn't have an East Asian style. He doesn't know how to use these brush pens. He does the sketch, the erase, the sketch, the pencil, and that's where his you know uh, talent spectrum is. So he can't copy what Peach does. All right, here's a master of the medium, probably the gold standard of comic books in terms. I mean, if you look at career, a guy who's just been. I mean, there are so many. I mean, there's obviously John Romita Senior is a product of the school of comic book art, if there is such a school. Um, but it's kind of like, through the Golden Age, Silver Age, and then the Bronze Age, all those artists that came before him had a direct influence on teaching him and training him, and he just reflected that. But he did it in his own uh, talented right, and that is again John Romita, and of course he passed this past year. A huge loss to the comic book industry, um, and his legacy extends beyond what he's put on the page. He has a biological son who is a master and legend in his own right, um, and these junior and senior in terms of what they do on the page and their style, uh, really like the image of their the characters and everything revolving around line work and all that. They're about as like, I guess I don't want to say they're polar opposites, but they're about as you know they're about as different as they come. But one thing I think um, that senior passed on to junior is that work ethic. These guys were just workhorses, and I'm sure junior saw his dad. I can't attest to how many deadlines or what the kind of work process senior did, but I can promise you, senior is probably a very professional, on time, and he had his work. He came in to the office, put in a full day's work, had enough, right? Probably had more inventory in terms of demand right? More supply than demand because he just worked. And I think that's where they have a commonality. It's just that industry know-how. Um, Senior really taught Junior how to be a professional, and that's what's great about Junior. Junior's still, he's got such an um, illustrious career behind him. He hasn't taken too many days off. He's just been working constantly, and I think when you look at somebody's legacy and career at the end of the day, you got to look at the whole body of work, right? You can't look at one or two, three good seasons and then say they're the best of all time. You got to look at the whole body of work. Um, and a career, if you're lucky, will last 20, 30 years. If you're going 40 years or more, and you've just been putting out consistent quality work over a period of 40 years, you have like probably, almost 2,000 covers to your name. I mean, that's a testament, and that's what these two guys are, a senior and junior. But we're focusing on senior. I love junior's work. Junior's not in my top 10. He's definitely, I think, in my top 20 in terms of artists, because I definitely read a lot of Ramita Junior's work. As a comic book artist, he worked on the X-Men. He worked on Daredevil. I mean, he's just been um, doing so much for Marvel, and I mean, he continues to put out stuff for Marvel to this day. He's a Marvel guy, right? Ramita Jr. is a guy who's been a company guy like his dad for his entire career. And so I think when you talk about Senior and his legacy, you gotta put Junior in that legacy accolade as well. Um, I know you do. All right. Yeah, so this is my favorite work by Ramita Senior. It's Spider-Man 100, just an iconic cover. Um, I mean, every Ramita Senior cover for me is just its own individual. So it's like kind of choosing between like great works of art, right? Um, you just kind of have to pick what resonates with you. But everything he's done over his, not only as a arc on Spider-Man, but throughout his work in comic books. Um, he's I mean, he basically had the foundation for all the character designs that came out of for all the Marvel characters, right? He basically had the modern designs for Black Panther, Captain America, Iron Man, like the whole spectrum of characters at Marvel. Romita Senior had put his signature on that, the evolution of that character, and that's what. Now, obviously, in the modern day, you have everybody's different take and design on a character, but from like the 70s all the way through the 90s, the look of the characters was pretty much established, and the guy establishing that sort of, I guess, standard of character design was this man here. So, um, incredible artist. All right, we are down to our top three. The top three, and um, John Byrne is somebody I got. I think anybody collecting comic books during my period was into the X-Men. That it just was hands down, uh, head and shoulders above the rest in terms of story, in terms of the characters. You really, Professor X is Martin Luther King Jr. Okay, Um, and what's being proposed in the X-Men stories is analogous to the civil rights movement in that here was a um, class of people who were being discriminated against because of their differences. And you know, the the individual fighting for acceptance of mutant kind was, you know, a sort of a peace loving, like a pacifist type who believed in nonviolence, who believed in like um, we've got to protect our the people that hate us, our oppressors, uh, and so that whole that concept in and of itself, like a school for gifted mutants, a leader, and then again an antagonist who had this sort of opposing ideal in Magneto. The contrast between, hey, we've got to take, Magneto's kind of like Malcolm X, by all means necessary, and you have Professor X who's like, no, we can't respond to violence with violence. So it was a very captivating story. Now, did it start out like that? Did the X-Men start out like that? Hell no. But what at some point, and this is where the Byrne Claremont, I think, uh, the Byrne Claremont, duo, if you want to call them a duo, and they're probably the greatest. I mean, you talk about all-star duos, like just creatives, right? A writer and an artist. I think Byrne Claremont, you just got to put them up there as probably the best of all time. And again, the Byrne's work, even though it wasn't, I mean, it was extensive, but it wasn't that long. But it had such an impact, and it really kind of changed the fortunes of Marvel. This title, this franchise, and yeah, it made X-Men. It really shot up the popularity of X-Men that continued to grow into the 90s, allowed Jim Lee to put that X-Men 1 out, and that exploded. I mean, it was just hands down Marvel's top IP. And I think, obviously you could make the argument Spider-Man has it probably had more commercial success, but if you look back on the first Marvel movies, it was the X-Men, right? X-Men. I'm not talking about MCU. I'm talking about the Fox X-Men in the early 2000s. It really captured what was the essence of the X-Men and it brought to the cinematic. And that went to a trilogy. Like, you don't make three movies of something if it's not culturally relevant to audiences and profitable, right? So again, if you grew up in my era, I started collecting outside of the Byrne Claremont, but again, that momentum was there. Like, I was reading classic X-Men and the stuff coming out at the time. Again, who was it? Silvestri was working on the books. Romita Jr. was working on the books. Barry Windsor Smith was working on the books. Uh, Art Adams was working on the books. I mean, just you had the most talented people at Marvel working on X-Men, and then Jim Lee comes along. So, in terms of my selection for my best, I've got so many Byrne books, and to be honest, I could have easily inserted a Byrne Superman book into this because I honestly think Byrne's work at DC. I mean, he's just done so many great books. I don't want to even put it in that context, but Byrne did a lot of DC, a lot of talented work at DC. But I got to go with what kind of created the name for this artist, and that's X-Men. And this is probably his most iconic book on X-Men, which is the Days of Future Past. Everybody's read this book. This cover is been homaged a gajillion times. It's probably one of the best comic book cover. I mean, you could just literally make the argument this is one of the best comic books of all time. Just a single standard issue, right? There's no there's no necessarily first issue, and that's the thing. Like you can, if you're a first issue collector, which a lot of people are, then this book probably isn't on your radar at all. But for people who enjoy like established characters in a I think this is the first future, like alternate future kind of story. And now everything out there, it seems, is something multiversal where you're going back in time and changing the timeline and dealing with all that BS. Well, this is like the original innovator of that arc, and that shows you how influential this book actually was. It was proposing like, hey, you could show characters dying, but if they're doing something to change the timeline that affects the past, they're not really dead. And so that was a novel idea that was introduced by this book. This book is incredible. So if you haven't read it, go out and read it. I'm sure most of you have read it. But this is, again, just about as classic as a book as you can get. And again, it's this run that really brings X-Men to the fore of popularity in pop culture, and just builds on the momentum of what you have here. Marvel promoted and marketed the crap out of this this Cockrum Byrne Claremont run of books. I mean, they continue to market off it. And I'll get into, like, I've read, I actually did a lot of reading I don't want to say a lot of reading. I just recently finished a couple of modern comic books that I've been meaning to read and kind of have under the belt. So I'll get into that after we get through this list. All right, that was number 3. Number 2 on the list. By now, the last 2 you guys probably know who they are, who my artists are. So not too much surprise there. But number 2 on the list is Neal Adams, and I have quite a bit of Neal Adams books now. Definitely wouldn't mind more. I have nowhere near the amount of work Mr. Adams has actually produced. I mean, it's a lot of books. So to like try to get them all is an impossibility, especially now. I mean, if you're talking about like books that are just constantly going up in value and collectors are seeking copies of, it's definitely Neal Adams works. So I've been fortunate enough to just pick up mid to low grade stuff here and there. Nothing too key, nothing. I mean, some keys, but I will continue to do that. And then there's a lot of sort of like non-key, sort of just everyday steady Eddie kind of works that he's put out over the years. And that's what I'm talking about, like a career that spans 40, 50, 60 years, right? In the comic book industry. We have a treasure trove of Neal Adams works out there. So we're really blessed to have have such an accomplished artist do what he does best consistently over the years, day in and day out. So the fact that we have all that presents a collecting challenge, but for me, anytime I run into an Adams book and it's the desire to pick it up is there. Just sometimes we don't have the funds or we don't have the money, and it's a different thing, but the desire is definitely there. Well, this is definitely my favorite book by Adams, because it's my favorite character, and I think if there's a character that you want to associate with Neil Adams, it's this character. Well, you can make the argument Batman, but I'm not a. I mean, I love Batman. Don't get me wrong. I collect Batman. I love Batman. Everybody loves Batman, but I prefer Superman above Batman. And there's some people who prefer Batman above Superman. That's fine. But I'm one of the guys. I'm in the Superman camp, and so for me, even with all the great covers and work that Adams did on Batman, and that's pretty much where I think people have landed. Like in terms of Neil's classic, iconic books, it's on the Denny O'Neil, his run with Denny O'Neil, right? Which transformed the character, which evolved the character into the dark, brooding, menacing, sort of mentally unstable detective that we all know and love. And it produced a dark line of like stories that continue to today. So definitely Adams has a huge influence on that title, huge influence um, on on the evolution of that character. Not so much on Superman. And again, Superman's not one of those characters that has had these sort of like real revolutionary changes to their story arc. He's been kind of the steady, Kansas farm boy, grows up to be the like, metropolitan reporter slash strongest superhero, sort of the most powerful superhero on the planet, kind of thing. So that has always been sort of the basis of Superman, and so there's not much you can do with that. You just gotta run with that. So there's not much room for being innovative when you do a Superman run. But I think what having said that, Neil knows the assignment and he pretty much gets an A on that assignment, and this is just an amazing cover by Neil, just capturing who the character is, right? Flying out of the city there, great pose, just a beautiful, beautiful. How I love how the cover, the color pops on Superman, and he's flying out of this sort of gray, dull, sort of urban background. Just really that contrast of him flying out of the page, flying, just popping out, is really captured on this cover. So, favorite book. I mean, Neil Adams is again the gold standard of comic book artists, and again, like I think, going back to talking about Peach and like comparing these artists, they're different. They're different, and so they're both masters. They're both talented on a specific level, but what makes Peach special and what makes Neil special, they're very different things. And I think part of it is cultural, but also a big part of it is the fact that they're just talented. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. Every artist has a degree of talent, but what separates them ultimately from the rest of the pack, because there's a gajillion artists out there, right? People writing, children's storybooks, people doing video game art, people just doing it for fun in their bedroom late at night. Um, you just got a whole spectrum of talent levels, but the passion that they all share, that can't be measured. Everybody shares the same passion, but what you can, I think, measure in terms of talent level, that is definitely on display. And so, but that's the thing when you're dealing with a person like Neil Adams and people like Neil Adams and Peach Momoko, you're comparing apples and oranges at that point in terms of their true talent levels. So, which brings me to my last artist, and the reason Jim Lee, I guess I never really got it. Maybe I have, maybe I haven't, but I'm going to get into it now. The reason Jim Lee is my favorite artist is I'm going to take you back to 1989 or 88. 1988. Yeah, it was 88. It was 89 or 88. But anyway, it was when in my first introduction to Jim Lee's work was not the Punisher War Journal like most people think. Um, uh, Jim was doing that, but I as a kid, as a young kid, um, I never got into Punisher War Journal. First of all, it was like, it was like the character. I didn't have much background on the character. I know he was like a character from Spider Man, but it was pretty violent. Like he just this, kind of this military dude out for vengeance, and he had guns, and that's kind of how he resolved things. And for me, that wasn't a story that I found compelling. So I didn't get into the Punisher, and I didn't even realize Jim Lee was doing work on the Punisher, or that he was even in the industry. Like he was a pretty much unknown to me. But then all of a sudden, we get X-Men 268. That's a great Wolverine cap cover. And I remember going to the comic book shop and buying that particular issue and just being amazed by the cover work, and then opening up the pages and being like, oh my God, what is this? And just being awed. Like as I was flipping the page, being like, oh my God, this guy's incredible. The artwork here, the storytelling that's going on, the artwork, just at another level, right? With the intensity in terms of the action, the pace, just the raw energy that was coming off the page. And so, yeah, after that, I was like, sign me up. I need more of this guy's work. And fortunately, I got in right at again, I was collecting X-Men, I was reading X-Men, and he came right at the perfect time, as like X-Men was popular, but Jim Lee was compounding that popularity with this incredible artwork. And issue after issue was just like, wow, what is this guy going to do next? No way. He did not just introduce this character. He did not just do that on that character. Like, it just was this entire like visual feast of like X-Men evolution, right? The evolution that was going on when Jim Lee came to the book, and how the costumes and like how the two teams eventually merged again and created just this buzz around the franchise, right? It was just I don't think it's I haven't seen it. I mean, I haven't been in comic books all that long, but I haven't seen it since I've been collecting. It matched in the relative short span on how a popular series evolves to be where it's at today. I mean, I've yet to seen that kind of evolution in such a short period, right? But that's the kind of license Marvel gave these young, let's just call them the Image Boys, right? That's what they gave the Image Boys. They gave the Image Boys all the license to do what they wanted to do on the page, and they ran with it. And Jim Lee ran with X-Men, and like ultimately, like, produced some of the best sales for Marvel in history. Now, so that's initially what got me into Jim Lee. Okay. Second, I find out this guy's Korean American, just like me. I'm like, what the F, man? Korean American? Are you kidding me? So you're saying that my favorite artist in comic books right now is a guy who has the same kind of background as I do. His parents uh, immigrated to this country. Um, and he came at a very young age. I came at a very young age. Um, so we have this very sort of like, you know, common path to this country. And here he is, man. I mean, he's the president of DC now. You go from immigrant to top of the comic book industry. Now he had to work hard to get there, right? Uh, I mean, Jim Lee's been producing comic books for what's going on 40 will be 40 years soon. So he has a huge body of work. He's been so influential on you know, both at Marvel, but more so at DC. In fact, I think when all said and done, Marvel's going to be kind of like that stepping stone to again what he will be widely recognized in his career as being uh, just a creative force at DC. Like, the guy's just worked on every book. He's worked on every transitional, uh, multiversal, uh, basically transforming every title within the DC universe, right? So I think when everything's said and done, he like Neil Adams, he'll be known for the DC character work that he did. Um, Now, which character will it be? Some people think it's Batman. Um, some could argue it's Wonder Woman, but I think for me it's the Man of Steel, Superman. And the reason I say that is like Superman's a hard assignment. Like I mentioned before, Neil Adams knew the assignment, right? He got this legacy character and DC's going to tell you straight up. I mean, they'll give some license to the artist. They'll be like, "Oh yeah, you can do that a little bit. Oh yeah, well, why don't you tweak that? But tweak it just a hair. Don't tweak it up a whole notch." And they give you these instructions when you come to a. I mean, for any character really, it doesn't matter if it's DC or Marvel. But I think Superman stands in a class by itself where you don't want to alter who the character is in essence, because that's their DC's main IP. As great as Batman is, DC's main IP will always be Superman, right? So Neil knew the assignment, and Jim knows the assignment, and Jim has come in. He's done great classic, given Superman such a classic look that really, I mean, like it's comparable to the greats that have worked on Superman throughout the years, right? I'm talking about the Swans, the Andrews, the Burns, uh, the the Siegels, uh, sorry, Schusters. I mean, just everybody who's worked on the book from an artistic standpoint. Um, they that classic look, uh, creating that character of who looks just confident, powerful, just exudes that strength. Like that's just remained a constant, hasn't evolved all that much. And again, Jim, his work on Superman has just been incredible, just absolutely incredible. And so for me, I think when I think of Jim Lee's work, I used to think he's like Wolverine would be the legacy character that Jim would be associated with for his career, but more and more that for me, it might be different characters for different people, but for me, the legacy character work for Jim Lee is definitely connected to Superman. And so this is a recent pickup, and more and more it's just a book that just captures that. Jim's work on Superman. This is just iconic uh, cover for Action Comics 1000, and they don't give this assignment to just anybody. I guess if you're heading the company, you can kind of give yourself the assignment, right? Let's see who's going to work on Superman this month. Oh yeah, me. Sorry guys, I'm going to work on it this month. You guys can probably do it. Work on 1001. Okay, but I'm going to do 1000. So he got the assignment and he ran with it. And man, did he do an amazing job here. Just a classic. There's no frills here. It's just a character, Metropolis in the backdrop. I mean, and man, what an impact. Just sticking to the basics. What an impact it has on the cover art. And that's what I love about these two covers. It's just Superman, nothing else. You don't need anything else on a cover like this. You don't need villains. You don't need Superman incinerating something with his heat vision. You don't need him. That's what made the Turner cover great too. He's just flying in outer space, right? Just him. So I think that's what makes a lot of the Batman covers great too. With the themes of the Batman covers, like it's oftentimes Batman by himself on like he's sitting on a gargoyle or something, or he's he's it's something. There's always like he's in the cityscape. He's on a swinging through the sky across skyscrapers, or it's oftentimes dark in tone, and again, just a lot of motifs on the Batman covers that make them special and that make them always riveting. But they don't change too much in terms of like what you want to communicate on a Batman cover, right? It's Batman. It's dark. He probably got like gargoyles or bats or something flying around, or he's sitting on something. But he's kind of perched and watching the city and all that. And all that stuff is great. It really makes a compelling character cover. And in the same vein, that's what you have with Superman, which is different. Superman's oftentimes bright, light, colorful. He's not a mental health issue on him. he had the loving farm family upbringing, and that's what we love about the character, right? Just this model of perfection and strength. So there you have it, my top 10 list of my favorite artists, the artists that I collect, and the favorite books in the collection by those artists. So thanks for sitting through that. Now I'm going to get into some reading. I've talk about some books I've read, and let me get one of the books here. Where did I put them? One's over there. So I recently read 3. I'm kind of late to the reading, modern comic book reading game. I haven't had much time to read a lot of books. I'm collecting books, and I'm picking up books from the stuff I've read, or the things I wanted to collect back in the day. But I know there's been, I stopped collecting in 97. So really the last comic books that I've read were up until 97. In fact, I think the X-Men Onslaught series was some of the last books I read. What else? What was I reading in 97? Wildcats. I was reading Wildcats in 97. Things like this is probably closer to 95, 96, but like the Peter David Aquaman I was reading. Again, more of the Daredevil stuff, the Romita Jr. Daredevil. Um, oh, the Ben Riley, the spider clone, right? That arc was huge during the mid '90s, I guess. I guess it wasn't '97, but it was kind of like mid '90s around when I stopped reading. And again, like everybody's been saying, like you got to read the Hickman X-Men run. Um, you got to read. There's just been books that I've been meaning to get to, and I just haven't had bandwidth or time to read it. But fortunately, with my family being gone, I kind of went to the library and I kind of looked for books, and I picked up. I don't have it with me right now. I returned it because I read it. I read Batman Volume 2, which is Capullo Snyder, and this is the Court of Owls, the lead into the Court of Owls. I think it's through issue 9 or 10, maybe 9 or 10. Yeah, issue 10. So the first 10 issues they put in this sort of graphic novel form, and I read that, and I was really impressed by uh, the Snyder Capullo that Batman. I was, yeah, that was a thoroughly good read. Um, I love I love what they were proposing. They were proposing that you know that Wayne's parents weren't killed. Bruce's parents weren't killed from this random like active street thuggery. It was actually a larger conspiracy of the secret sort of society throughout the years that really ruled Gotham from the shadows. Um, and I mean, it's a little bit cliche, but I thought it worked well for Batman, like to kind of put a new twist on Batman's origin, and it actually probably gives Batman uh, more impetus to do what he's doing, to fight forces that are kind of not readily in sight, but things that are working behind the scenes that are either political, economic, um, kind of like your modern day conspiracy theory, but that the the theory is actually have was the thing that had an impact on your life, right? These these sort of Illuminati type, you know, uh, powers are the ones that had an impact on your development, um, and created the trauma in your life. So I thought that was pretty cool. Also, Talon was a pretty cool character, and the reveal of Talon's background being, Grayson's, I think, grandfather or whatever, great grandfather. I thought that was pretty cool. So overall, if I were to rate the story, I'd give it a solid 9 out of 10. I was really impressed with the way that they set up that story, and how the mystery kind of unravels, and again how Batman, through his just resourcefulness and smarts, really outsmarts this like secret society, right? So I'm curious to kind of read past. I know it kind of ends right there, and there's this sort of new branching out of what the Court of Owls is doing, and I'm curious to get to that. But hopefully, we'll read that. Um, we'll get our hands on that book at some point. Now, the next book I was able to complete, and this is one I've been meaning to read because everybody's like, you got to read it, and it's so good, and it really transforms um, the the whole. Like I just said, X-Men was about the civil rights movement, right? And Professor X represents uh, the pacifist. Um, and man, Hickman flips that on its head with House of X. Um, so essentially, what Hickman is like. Now, I'm very curious to read more of this. I think what is it? It's House of X and then Power. So this is House and Powers of X combined, I believe. Um, so it's the first like 12 issues. So I think what comes after this, I don't know if it's Sword of X or whatever, but I just want to read more because I want to find out what happens. But ultimately, what Hickman is, he's just flipped the X-Men script on itself, and basically he turns Charles into Magneto. Magneto, kind of more of a moderate Magneto, and Charles into Magneto, but with the sort of the pacifist foundation, if that makes sense. But he brings these two characters together, puts them on the same page with the same goals in mind, and ultimately the mutants create a nation state for themselves, and they just don't want to take humanity's crap anymore. I'm basically saying, like, look, you're hell bent on destroying us, but you know what? We're gonna unite. We're gonna create our own society, essentially, and have sovereignty. So you have no bearing on how you can. First of all, we can wipe you out. We're more powerful than you, but we're giving you a chance to live in this new world, um, to live in this world, exist on the planet together. We're giving you this chance. But if you mess with that equilibrium, we're going to come down. We're going to come down hard on you. And it's part of this larger multi-timeline set of events, which Moira McTaggart is sort of the linchpin. She travels throughout each timeline, learning more about what the X-Men have to do, how they can change their fate, because ultimately their fate is just like they just get destroyed by Sentinels in every timeline, right? They don't advance past a certain point, and the entire mutant race is just obliterated. And so by this timeline, they established, like, look, like that's only made known to, like, this knowledge of what will happen, what's happened in other timelines, is only shared with a few individuals. But those few individuals take that information, like Charles and Magneto, and they again create this utopia, this mutant utopia on Krakoa, and from there they kind of dictate their own sort of future. It's sort of a new territory for them. But the seeds of, again, that how things end, that commonality of this sort of, like, humans using technology, Sentinel technology, to destroy them time after time. That those seeds are there, and again, just all the how they bring these characters together. Like, they have Apocalypse and Mr. Sinister sitting on the council together and deciding, laws and policies of the mutants, and how again all these different, like, the fact that the mutants, not only do they possess super strength and super, like, powers, they possess advanced, intelligence, and the science that they can apply, they can also apply to technology as well. So a lot of cool things that have happened in this book that kept me reading and wanting more. Now it's a lot of it is sort of like at first you're just like, what's going? It is hard to follow, but eventually, like if you read in deep, because there's a lot of notes, there's a lot of like kind of like the Watchmen. There's just a lot of like supplemental sort of like contextual, like there's diaries, there's like like historical I guess like narrative in there that's just adds more depth to what's going on. And of course, the core characters are essentially the same. They're not changing the essence of any of these characters. They're just putting them in a sort of a new scenario. But again, they have this cloning, this genetic cloning technology that I thought this was very novel. So they're able to bring back dead mutants. Well, we're finished with the list. I'm talking about Hickman's House of X now, Damien. Which I'm just talking about books that I haven't read too many modern books, and I think for me that I was just mentioning the bulk of my reading kind of stopped back in the 90s when I stopped collecting, and I haven't really been reading a lot of modern comic books, which is to my detriment. I want to read more. It's just getting the books first of all. Although I'm trying to get them at the library now and just reading them. But I was mentioning I just read Batman Volume 2, the Snyder Capullo Court of Owls, the first 10 issues of that. I read that in graphic novel form. Great. Love that book. I also love this book. And I think this is also a 9 out of 10. Though I gave the Capullo Snyder book a 9 out of 10. I'd give this one a 9 out of 10 as well. This one, there's a lot more in terms of reading. It's a longer run. I think there's 12. This is like maybe 12 or 14 issues. Not quite certain, but this is just masterfully done. The world that they're creating, the time. First of all, the way they're able to use these different timelines to set the stage for what's ultimately a huge shift in one of the major characters, which is Professor X. Right, Professor X is what really his change from like pacifist to more like, you mess with us, you're gonna get this like a big stick, right? Like you mess with Texas, you're gonna get the stick. So that's what I really found interesting about that. It's a complete, almost a 180 from what we associate Professor X to be. And of course, Professor X is completely like he's not in a wheelchair. He's like, he's young. He's like like a very fit, younger kind of guy. Very powerful. Obviously, he's still a powerful mutant, but he can walk and do all these things. So, really coming from a position of strength. And again, just very impressed with the story and what it's proposing, which is mutants uniting in their and understanding, like, look, our only threat is humans, and so yeah, again they unite on this. They team up with Apocalypse, Mr. Sinister. I mean, they get all the baddies there. I think one thing that was also interesting, I don't think it's a negative, but they like Sabretooth, right? Sabretooth is like the lone guy who like doesn't follow any kind of rule or law, and like goes around killing humans and just kind of acts on his violent impulses. And so they condemn him, make an example of him, condemn him with these first sort of nation laws of the nation state of the mutants, and they condemn him to this like Krakoa prison, which is this organic living thing, an island. It's a living island, so it's sort of like mutant terrain as well as not only mutant characters, but a mutant terrain. But anyway, I'm just curious to see how this thing ends because they set it up like, okay, we set up our nation state. Now we're just this is it's a new era, right? The future can either be very bright or it's going to be very, and in knowing, the humans are going to do what they do. And essentially humans start messing with technology and evolution to where they accelerate their evolution, and that's eventually what is going to clash with the mutants. So it's a very interesting prospect. Great writing. The artwork is amazing. Everything about this book is great. Just like the Batman Volume 2 that I read. So like it's just great to like getting back into modern comic books. These are two books I've been meaning to read. I've been wanting to read. And yeah, they did not disappoint. Like oftentimes you like hear somebody say, "Oh, I guess it's a great book," and you got to read it. You pick it up and you read it, and you're just like, it was okay. But no, these were actually very, very good. Um, and I'm just again, I just want to conclude and read the rest of it, see what happens. So those two books are I just recently read. And here's a third book. And this is one I've been meaning to read as well, because again, I'm just a big fan of Dan Mora. Dan Mora's art, and I'm reading Batman Superman World's Finest. I'm on I think this third book right now, but this one is not as, I mean, it's good. Don't get me wrong. I still think it's a good book, and that's what's really surprising me about these modern books. The they're really written with like a sort of like a cinematic like scope, meaning like you can see they're epic. They're just epics, right? The Court of Owls is epic in its own sense. It's not like epic on a grand scale, but it's epic in terms of what they're proposing, in terms of the character, uh, the character transformation, or what's revealed to the character that transforms and moves the story. Um, and that was it. These are all sort of big shift storyline shifts from what I've read in the past on these books. But this one is sort of more standard fare. Like they introduce a villain, kind of like a mystery. They go out trying to figure out what's behind, um, this character and why these villains are sort of, forming this union and collaborating to bring down superheroes. Like, um, again, I'm not there yet, but they've introduced the Devil Neza, which is I guess the main antagonist in this, and he's some resurrected, like um, Chinese like warrior. Um, it it's not as I'm kind of disappointed in the story because again I've read two great graphic novels, and then coming in with all the expectation like Mora Wade, you're thinking it's going to be epic, but it's not. It's not that epic. I mean, it has a lot of cool characters in it. And there's a lot of action, and I actually really like the fact that in this, you know, they kind of subdue Superman in the early pages of this. He's infected with this radioactive red kryptonite, but Batman and the Doom Patrol are able to subdue him, and then kind of restore him. I thought that was kind of cool. But uh, the more as I'm just disappointed with this bad guy so far. The way they've introduced him, just not that compelling. But the artwork is amazing. In fact, if you're to ask me of the three, which book has the best artwork, hands down, this book, Mora's artwork is incredible. It would have been interesting to see Mora work on the Hickman X-Men, um, see how that would have turned out. But I think Mora Superman Batman, man, is that it's just incredible. I mean, look at this. Look at this work right here. Batman and Superman there. It's incredible work right there. I love how here, like it's the characters are jumping in and out of the panels. Awesome, awesome stuff. The story though is just again standard fare, so I think the artwork definitely feels like a 10, but with the story, I got to give this like a 7.5. Again, I haven't finished it yet. I may bump that or drop that depending on how it ends. But the Devil Neza just seems a little contrite, and you know, it's derivative. It's not anything original. So, those are the couple of books I'm reading. It's been a fun summer in the sense I not only comic book pickups, but I've been able to read a couple comic books. I'm going back and reading more of the classic issues. I have I'm still slogging my way through these two books right here, the detective action. These are just select stories from the past 80 years. I mean, this we're at year 85 for Action Comics, believe it or not. But yeah, this is just like all this early Superman uh, stuff. That's just tremendous, just absolutely tremendous. Really enjoying that. I'm gonna try to do more reading because I realize now, like when I was into comic books in the 80s and 90s, like the writing and the comic books art were absolutely spectacular. But the comic books today are really top notch, especially I think the ones that the publishers um, that they invest in the quality. Like they get like a Wade and a Mora together, they get like a Capula and Snyder together. Like these are guys that they trust with the IPs, and they say, hey, look, we want you to come up with something original, fun, like compelling. And man, I mean, again, um, there's just no fat on these stories anymore. Like before, you just had there was a lot of fat that you had to trim and kind of get through to get to like what was compelling about the book. But from the first page, for the first pages of these comic books, they just get you from the get go. And again, I think that has more to do with um, on a run now. They're envisioning how this will translate, potentially translate on the big screen. So there's always that backdrop of like, can this? And again, all these three books I read: World's Finest, Batman, um, The Court of Owls, and X-Men, The House of X. These all could easily be movies. All three of these books could easily cover the big screen and I think have a big impact on the on on the cinematic uh, platform, right, on that channel. Whereas you probably couldn't say that about like most 80s and 90s books, right? Most 80s and 90s books they're fun books. But they're not they're not thought out on that cinematic scale, how it could translate on the big screen. So it's not necessarily the best translation. Like, and that's I think where, for example, we were talking about Secret Wars, right? What are they going to do with Secret Wars? That's the big question mark. Like, um, are they going to go old school or new school? And as great as the original shooter Zek Secret Wars was, you can't really translate that to today's cinematic experience. Um, I think it works in the context of like, oh wow, I've never seen like Monica Rambeau in a comic book before, and now oh, she's like united with all these like superheroes. What's she all about? Or like seeing the X-Men outside of the context of their story, but with in the larger Marvel universe context, like Wolverine next to Hulk, next to Hawkeye, next to like Iron Man. Like you just that whole like the imagery itself was what made that comic book very compelling. But like the story itself, like it's just like they're brought together and then they kind of nitpick with the villains and they go off by themselves and then they go into their own little faction. I mean, it's not a well written story for translating onto the cinematic aspect. Favorite era for Superman? Oh, that's a good question. I want to say the Burn Superman. I mean, I think Silver Age Superman is probably um, again from what I've my exposure and what I've read. Um, the Silver Age is definitely the best era of Superman in terms of light, sort of targeting the young reader, um, and that sort of nuclear household, suburban lifestyle sort of representation of like big city, kind of like superhero fighting crime and solving it. But it's just a very contrite sort of packaged book. Nothing that it really extended past one or two issues. Is just a single issue. Here's the story. Here's the story arc. Here's the resolution. All wrapped up in a nice and comic books, that's just a bygone era, right? That's not how books work anymore. But a lot of humor, a lot of sort of like interesting characters of the month. Every issue had brought about a new scenario or character, but you had a lot of like just motif stories as well, like them getting outsmarted and then finding a way to outsmart the villain again. And like it's not, I think as a modern reader, maybe if you're reading at the time as a kid, that was like cool. But once the Bronze Age and the Copper Age came around, it's like you kind of wanted more. And then we have these like the serial runs of a story arc, which now in the modern period is sort of the standard fare, right? You just have this like 10 or 12 issues to really map out a story. Um, I mean, now you have crossover sort of crossover stories as well. So you have books melding into books and all that. Um, so, but for me, yeah, I think the era I grew up in is the Supermans I was reading, which is the Byrne Superman. Um, that will be my Superman. And I know not everybody's a fan of the Byrne Superman because it is it's a kind of like a new, what at the time was a modern take on Superman, but um, for me, the artwork and the story was compelling enough to make it stand out. Um, the Jim Lee run on Superman, as great as the artwork was, the story, the how they brought Zod and revealed Zod, and you know, having Superman kind of like repiece the memory loss and all that. It just was just sort of, it was just too long, and not the execution. The story execution was just poor. And I don't know. Azzarello, I think maybe he was, again, maybe he just struggles with having to deal with a character like Superman. But he just did not. It was not a good run. Um, and it was really unfortunate too, because that was like Jim Lee's first foray into Superman, and the fact that they just had a weak story to go on was just unfortunate. And it's a real contrast to what Loeb and he did on Batman. That was like amazing, right? The amount of like issue to issue. Oh, it just kind of building the crescendo to like who is Hush, like what's driving him to do all these things, and like introducing all the villains and how they're connected, and behind the scenes into wanting to bring about Batman's demise. That was brilliantly done. But again, I think Superman. And again, I'm interested to read more of the modern Superman stuff. See where it's at. I'm sure not everything is on par in quality with what I just checked out and read. I can't. In fact, I know that to be true, because I picked up a lot of modern comic books and just read the first couple pages, and I'd be like, I'm just not. I'm not vested. I'm not going to invest more into it. But this Hickman X-Men, I am invested. I want to read more. Wouldn't mind reading more of the Capullo Snyder Batman. See how that uh, kind of pans out, as well as the the World's Finest is not bad. I mean, it's not better than the two previous, but it's not bad. I think I'm enjoying it. I think there's potential for it to be really good. I like the fact that they've introduced like Supergirl, and they've introduced again the Doom Patrol. They're not the characters that are all that I'm that familiar with, but they seem like bring they introduce them to make them compelling for the story, at least. Like you bought into them being part of the universe that they're in. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's my video for now. I wish I could do more reading and talk about more books. I may at some point. I hope to read more read more good comic books. I don't want to spend time reading junk comic books. Um, that's what kind of turns me off to actually reading comic books, is like when I started reading a comic book and I'm like, I do want to give it a chance to like flesh out and see if it's good or not. Um, and there are books that probably have to read maybe 2-3 issues in before it gets really good. And those are the books that really like, that are frustrating to read, because you're like, it's got to get good at some point, so you continue to read and read and read, and then you find out no, it's not good at all, and just a big waste of time. So I want to try to avoid that. So if you got any recommendations, Damien, on what to read, I am all ears. Anything good? I want to keep it within the DC Marvel realm, the things I'm, the characters and stories I grew up reading. I mean, if it's something contemporary, like if you're going to say something is killing the children, or something along those lines, I'm glad you agree. Yeah, I'm I'm glad you agree. 20 issues is just a long time, actually. And then he did some action comics as well, and he did that Man of Steel, uh, 6 issues. So he did quite a bit on Superman. There's a good body there, but you're absolutely right. Like, had he done more, it would have been better. But he's done so much. He's done so much. Yeah, I think Superman with Loeb would have been. I mean, a Loeb Superman. What? But the thing is, like, Loeb was writing, or he was producing Smallville right around that time. So I don't know if maybe that had an impact on whether he could work on Superman or not. But that would have been amazing. Lee Loeb on Superman would have been spectacular. I'm still waiting for like Lee to do a real like monumental Superman run, kind of like you know, uh, like working with a established writer and doing like 12 issues on a new Superman story, one that delves into the origin as well, the roots, but something new and innovative as well. I think it'd be cool. Okay, I'll check that out. Action Rebirth. I've been meaning to read Action Rebirth actually because, um, I mean, the art is one thing, but I mean, I don't. I'm kind of the. I'm of the camp that a comic book doesn't have to have the best art to be a good comic book. Although that's ultimately for me sort of the exclamation or the stamp of approval if it has both good story and good art. But it can have like medium, like above average art in it, and just a really great story. I think that's a good read as well. So yeah, I think Action Rebirth is something I've been wanting to read. It's just the art just doesn't. I don't know. The art doesn't seem like that compelling. But then again, we'll see. Bendis, I think, if Bendis is creating a new sort of outlook on Superman, or just new characters that really make that series compelling, I think it's worth taking a look. Oh yeah, dude. Uh, I can get it out right now. I have it right here. So let me. Thanks for reminding me, Brandon. So I recently met up with a community member. He's in the chat right now, Brandon. Great guy. We met and we traded some books. I got a bunch of Jim Lee books, and he picked out some books from my collection that he wanted. And Brandon and I were talking, and uh, I didn't realize I knew he was an artist, but um, I didn't realize he had put out like published comic books when he was younger, and actually got published in like the paper and like put out uh, some comic book uh, work early in his like high school uh, days. Um, but he's really talented. I mean, he's a very talented artist, and I'm gonna just show. He gave me this a copy of this comic book that he worked on, and he completely um, did all the work on this, printed and I mean it's not published, but he printed it out, and um, it's incredible. I'm going to show you some of the interiors on this. Um, so it's basically a crossover between Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Daredevil and Elektra. And look at this artwork. So this is, again, it's drawn by Brandon. Here's his, if you guys want to follow him, Brandon Rodriguez. And again, this is a book he created himself, self-published. And look at this. Like Daredevil, April O'Neil right there. And then you've got the hand. You've got the Turtles and Daredevil fighting. Who's that? Is that Donatello? No, who's that? It's Raphael, right? Raphael. Anyway, not the biggest Ninja Turtles fan, but yeah, just incredible work. And I was telling Brandon, like, he should definitely like do a Kickstarter or something. Like, this is just, look at this Elektra. Look at that Elektra right there. And Brandon's influences are Jim Lee, right? Todd, I think you mentioned Todd McFarlane as well. Why don't you mention in the chat, Brandon, your influences? But just incredible work. So that was really cool to pick up. And, this is obviously just something I'm going to enjoy kind of reading and having in my collection. Oh, so you're not recommending Bendis? So this is the thing, like, Superman presents quite a challenge for, I think, most writers. Like Batman is a formula that I think if you're a writer, the trauma of losing your parents and how that, and again, that central transformation, like taking grief, anger and grief, and channeling it into, doing good deeds, preventing, just crime fighting, right? Crime fighting. That you can go so many ways with that foundation, right? Like you can go dark. You can go down a dark path. You can also just bring in a bunch of villains, because Gotham is its own living sort of, like, it's an organic thing that you have to contend with. It's a living thing that you have to kind of interact and respond and react and counteract. And, so those kinds of things are, I think, for a writer, much easier to create a compelling story out of than Superman. Superman, the Superman story is so ingrained, and that's the thing. Like, DC's not going to give you a lot of leniency there to transform the character, right? I thought getting rid of his red underpants was a horrible idea, but the fact that DC let let Jim Lee do that tells you a lot. But that was a bad move, right? Like, Superman's one of those things that you just can't change the formula. It's kind of like Coca-Cola, right? It's like you can't change the formula Coca-Cola. Um, Whereas Batman, man, Batman is like what's a good what's a good commercial product? Batman's like the iPhone. You gotta create, new versions, newer, cooler versions of the iPhone. And people love their iPhone, so they're just gonna, oh, I'm just gonna get iPhone number 15, and then that's sort of Batman's, but the Superman's different. Superman's like bat. We say Batman and Superman are legacy characters, but really, Batman's not legacy in the sense he's legacy in the sense he's been around a long time. But Batman's not legacy. If you compare Batman to what he was in the '60s to what he is today, that's not it's legacy in terms of longevity. It's not legacy in terms of what the character is. Superman's different. Superman, like what Superman was in the 30s, is not all that different from what he is today. Um, and so, I think that it proposes a harder sell because Superman is really like he's what's good. Like Batman's like has this like little dark like story arc and narrative behind him, and that's compelling in and of itself. Superman's just this alien, right? Um, and he has these like cool powers, and those powers evolve here and there. Um, but he's adopted, he's an alien. He came to this country and he culturally adapts to the American set of values. Um, and now it's not even American. It's kind of like he's adapted to, humans, right? Earthlings. Um, and he's just this Boy Scout. He's a Boy Scout, right? You can't you can't change all that much about what in essence is a Boy Scout. So I think, um, everybody. I think Superman's just struggled with just a really good approach to the legacy character, right? Um, uh, but then again, people who love Superman, that's why they read Superman. You can do. You don't have to. What Superman like? He's just gonna be the guy who comes and saves the day. 10 out of 10 times, he's the guy. You know what? Somebody's in trouble. I'm gonna go, and I'm gonna save them. And so, um, I think for Superman fans, if somebody, and that's what I'm saying. I'm talking as a Superman fan now. Like, so it might not be the most interesting, new, innovative, compelling thing that if you're writing a Superman, you think, oh, this is gonna like wow fans and all that, and you put that out there, and it's like kind of messing with the secret formula that makes Superman Superman. It's gonna fail. So the ones that understand Superman keep Superman Superman, but within that context is able to really create a compelling either villain or set of circumstances that Superman has to contend with and find. Um, and it's different from Batman, right? Batman has to use his wits and his like things to get out of the situation. But Superman's really about avoiding kryptonite or like just like having these things, but ultimately at the end of the day, like, hey, I'm Superman, and whatever thing that you had to inhibit me at the beginning of this little story, I've overcome, and now I'm going to put you in prison, or I'm going to subdue you or destroy you. And so, just run with that. Don't try to complicate it. It's not. It's it's a it's kind of like the again. It's like Coca-Cola, right? People will drink Coca-Cola no matter what the occasion or circumstances if you stay true to the formula. You change that formula and it's like, man, this isn't Coke. I'm not enjoying it. So, and there's a lot of themes in Superman to deal with. There's so many. Superman has more themes than Batman. More themes you can touch upon, especially in this politicized uh, environment that we're living in, right? Um, because you're talking about democracy, you're talking about freedoms, you're talking about the American way of life, whatever that is. American way of life really is built on, right? Economic prosperity, opportunities, the freedom to do what we want, create what we want, consume what we want, right? There's all these like just larger sort of American, you know, I don't want to say just necessarily economic, but political economic themes that America is currently dealing with, whether it's the war in Ukraine, whether it's the rising threat of China, whether it's, I mean, obviously you don't want to like target China in the story and like, make them out to be bad. But I mean, you can bring those elements, those threats, those similar threats to the American way of life, to the American way of prospering and all that. Like bring those themes into a compelling Superman story. You don't have to go all Hollywood, but just keep it basic and simple. There's so much to draw upon there. It's kind of sad that they're, you know, I think the Kryptonian, like lineage and like bringing in Kryptonian threats and all that's because those are the only ones that can challenge Superman's prowess, right? You can't have a bunch of humans like bringing kryptonite or having some form of kryptonite to take him down all the time. So that's where that therein lies a challenge. Like who do you get to challenge Superman? But I mean, you can do it creatively and bring about all these like larger themes that create make it a thought provoking, sort of tale. Um, and so that's what I'd like to see. Like if there's gonna be people working on Superman and they want to, this is a challenge for James Gunn, okay? And I've been saying from the start, James Gunn. First of all, it's gonna. I think what one thing James Gunn has working for him is um, bringing about a cast of characters around Superman that it's going to be funny, right? You're going to care about the characters around Superman because ultimately that's who Superman is protecting, right? He's going to so whether that's Lois Lane, whether that's Jimmy Olsen, whether that's a set of new characters, you want to establish that there's this um, adoptive family that Superman has in his life, Clark Kent has in his life, that he's ultimately going to protect. And that's been whatever era of Superman, that's always going to be at the crux of what you're doing. Now, ultimately comes down to what is the challenge that he's going to overcome, right? What are you going to propose a villain? Are you going to propose something happening to the planet? Or are you going to propose something? Maybe Superman takes on climate change, or like he could have such an impact on climate change, right? Superman could cool the planet. He has the power to reverse climate change, right? That would be a great movie or story. Get people thinking about, hey, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't drive my gasoline car. Maybe I should go out and get an EV because Superman told me to. Something along those lines. Something again. There's just so much you could do with the character. I just hate seeing these sort of like rehashes of like him battling cosmic beings and just taking this Marvel approach to Superman, right? Like, oh, timelines and like here's a Kryptonian super character that is, he's more powerful than Zod or something, and just bringing and like having that be, how is Superman going to defeat this? Whether it's Doomsday, Darkseid, whatever the super elite, galactic villain or whatever is, like that's when you're just kind of reaching for straws and not being very creative with what you have to work with. So, um, uh, Tomasi and Gleason, okay, I'll check it out. I love Dan Jurgens. I love Dan Jurgens. I think he had it. He understood Superman. You got to understand Superman if you want to write Superman. It's not just about going back and reading like Action Comics 1 and going back and watching the Superman movie. Like either you're a fan, I think this is where maybe the disconnect is. You can be a great writer and not be a fan of Superman. I think that's a bad combination. You have to be a fan of Superman. I almost think like if you're a fan of Superman, you can write a Superman story. It's the ones that aren't fans, and you can tell Jurgens is a fan of Superman. And that's what I think. That's why, whether you hate or love the Death of Superman story, I mean that was really it was a cool story the way they brought him back and the reveal about the other Supermen, right? Um, okay, I haven't read Morrison's All Star Superman, but I have read Frank Miller's Superman Year One, which was bad. Frank Miller is a guy I don't trust with Superman, to be honest. Um, he's the one that really, I think, uh, he's the one that really gave Superman the biggest sort of PR, um, public relations uh, discrediting. He made Superman into this like arm of the Reagan administration. I'm going back to Dark Knight Returns, but in that story, first of all, he has Batman beating Superman, which is I found that compelling. Found that compelling. He cheats. He has kryptonite and um, a metallic suit to take Superman down. But I just found that like there was a lot of Superman hate in that story, like underlying like resentment for Superman. And I just hated the fact that they created this like the Superman would become this political arm of the U.S. government to overthrow dictatorships, regimes, and like fight the Soviets and all that. And it was just it's just so not Superman. And the fact that Miller made the character like that created a lot of hate for. I mean, that's one of the most read graphic novels in comic book history, right? Like everybody read The Dark Knight Returns, and what Miller did to to Kal-El's character, it just basically took a crap on 50 years of Superman, and turned him into this like sellout. I wouldn't mind reading a Wolfman. I have the collector on the side. Okay. I actually kind of want to read the Snyder Super. You said it wasn't well executed though. Yeah, well, what was he doing with that? It's sometimes you like Frank Miller just puts stuff out because I guess he can, and um, I recently read the Azzarello Miller Dark Knight Returns 3, or is it 2 or 3? It's the conclusion of that entire. It's where the Candor like that religious cult of Kandorians escape, and they start wreaking havoc, and they're going after Batman, and Batman Batman dies. Superman takes him to the Kryptonian, the Rejuvenator, and revives him. Batman becomes young again, and then proceeds to rain down kryptonite, like literally kryptonite rain on these Kandorians, and then they wipe, they take them out. And I don't know. I just again, it goes back. I love Frank Miller. Okay, don't get me wrong, but I think there's a time and place for Miller, and Miller really needs to like, I don't know, just kind of change it up, or just it was not well executed and well written at all. Um, and again, um, Miller, it's like hit and miss these days with Miller, and it's unfortunate to say that because he's one of my favorite writers of all time. But his modern stuff is like his All Star Batman and Robin, that was horrible. Uh, the Dark Knight Returns 2 was horrible. Dark Knight Returns 3 was a little bit more salvageable than 2, but was still bad. Um, Again, all the early stuff, like Frank Miller's Sin City, uh, Dark Knight Returns, Year One, his Daredevil, those are just amazing. But at some point, I think he maybe just got lazy, there's just a disconnect. Maybe he wasn't all that all that like, you got to grow as a writer, right? Maybe you just got stunted at a certain rate. But anyway, he's still one of my favorite writers. I don't want to like judge him too harshly, but yeah, the Superman year Miller Year One was pretty bad. I got to agree with you there. Grant Morrison, okay. I like Grant Morrison. I'll check out. So you're saying he did a run on Superman? I would trust more. I mean, Morrison's first of all British, so he probably would take a very American. Like he could probably objectively look at America, like all the problems and all the sort of the political issues America is dealing with. Um, but I get again, like if you put Superman in the context of like American hegemony, he's not a very compelling character, right? Like he's just a. I mean, it's a you could look at it as a colonial like an extension of America's um, colonialism. Well, not America's not colonial, but imperialism. Um, but that I think you can work with some stuff there, especially if you're a British writer. I think you could probably work in something there where it's like it's currently relevant, but it also tells the story of Superman. So I'm just saying, I'm not a writer. I have lots of ideas of what I think would make a cool Superman story, but um, is that what again, we live in such a stratified society where everybody likes different things and they like things their way, and it's hard to appease everybody. I feel like Superman's just one of those characters, like no one really everybody likes well, I shouldn't say like, everybody is aware of Superman, but no one likes Superman. Like it's hard. I look on social media. There are very few Superman fans. There's a lot of Mutant Ninja Turtle fans, a lot of GI Joe fans like myself, a lot of Batman fans, a lot of Spawn fans, a lot of Spider Man fans. But Superman, for some reason, uh, has kind of faded from, and that's what worries me. Is like, we have 80 years of this character, and he's got to last another 80 years. If it's up to me, like I think people in the industry also realize, like, look, a healthy Superman, uh, a strong Superman character, thriving Superman character in the industry is good for everybody. Good for DC, good for Marvel, good for everybody. So hopefully, get the character. I'm really banking a lot on Gunn, and obviously, Superman can't do it by himself. He's no longer um, the Gunn Superman. Was it they're calling Superman Legacy, right? Uh, the Gun Superman Legacy can't introduce all these. I hope they don't bring in one single DC universe hero, and I know they probably will. They'll probably have like maybe some core Justice people, but I just really hope that the Superman Legacy movie just focuses on the Superman story, and then you know once that's established, they can do whatever. But this first Legacy film, I hope they don't have to rely on crutches. Like they don't have to rely on a Batman appearance or a Wonder Woman cameo or any of that thing. I just hope they focus on three things: his origin, his love of Lois, and his adoptive family and friends, right? And a really just a cool villain, like a new villain we haven't seen before, Brainiac. Brainiac would be a great villain. Um, in fact, in this Wade, in this Wade, sorry, in the my my Adventures of Superman. Are you watching that, by the way, Damien? My Adventures of Superman. I'll check it out. Yeah, yeah, and that's Morrison, right? It's a Grant Morrison book. That's what you're telling me. I should go out and read. I haven't read it yet. That's a lie. I read the first issue of All Star Superman, and it didn't. I should have probably read more. I didn't. I wasn't into it in the first issue. I'll go back and read it again. Um, I mean, the premise was okay. It's just I didn't wasn't into it all that much. It was just sort of this a lot of exposition. So I should probably give it more of a chance. So in My Adventures of Superman, first of all, they race swap Lois Lane. She's Korean. She's Korean American, and I know that doesn't sit well with I. to be honest, the fact that I'm Korean, I am happy about that switch. And again, Naman and I had the theory that Lois was biracial to begin with, right? Like we had just this theory, the way the characters presented with the dark hair and all that. There was this ethnic aspect to her that, again, in the golden age and silver age, if she's biracial, she's probably not going around, proclaiming she's her mother's heritage. But it's presented like Lois's parents are presented throughout that thing, and she's white. Okay, so we know Lois Lane is white, but in this new series, again, they race swap her. She's Korean, and I think they're proposing that she's like maybe biracial, but she's Korean. And but anyway, in this story, they're bringing back Zod in season 2. They're proposing. I think they show a reveal at the end where Brainiac basically meets a Kryptonian, powerful Kryptonian, and is like trying to recruit him to join him on Earth to take down Superman and rule Earth, right? So it'll be. I think that's pretty cool. The fact that Zod and Brainiac together to team up versus Superman, that presents a real challenge. But I just hope they don't rehash the Zod storyline where it's like, the guy do something. I think with the fact that Brainiac's in there, the Zod and Brainiac team up, that should change that dynamic a little bit. But if it's just this brawl in the streets of Metropolis, like, Zod and Superman battling it out on the streets, that's not all that original. But again, that's a compelling villain team up, Zod and Brainiac, because I mean you're essentially taking sort of the strengths and weaknesses of both characters and balancing them out, right? So that can present a very momentous challenge for Superman. But I think the best, again, I think when you diminish Superman's intellect, which a lot of kind of writers and modern people, I think after Miller had a big part to do with that. And I'll never forgive him for making Superman such a douchebag. But like that continued to be sort of this motif in Superman stories, that he's somehow slow. He's not as smart as Batman. Like Batman can outsmart him. Like you saw that happening in like the DCU. Like, right, like he doesn't have the brains to keep up with it. He's just brawn, no brains kind of thing. Like that's so not the character. That is so not. I mean, what Superman are you reading where Superman can't deduce things on his own, right? That's always been a part of Superman's character. One thing, where Superman kind of, I think where Clark, like if you look at Clark Kent, this is sort of like Clark Kent's so concerned about people finding out he's Clark Kent, right? That can kind of like, I know in past stories, Superman's kind of been like, oh man, they'll find out my secret identity, so I don't want to do this. I don't want to, like, and that can kind of come up across as indecisive or wishy-washy or just cowardice. But that's not Superman, right? That's a high degree of thought right there, like protecting your identity, like your secret identity, to protect your loved ones. That's a pretty powerful thing you need to protect, right? So, although I don't see how anybody, right, can mistake Superman's a big guy, like Christopher Reeve putting on a pair of glasses and fooling everybody. That in itself is a sort of like just like suspending the realm of realism right there. Like the people like Lois can't figure out. That's what's great about the modern Supermans. Lois is in on, like, she knows Clark is Superman, so that just, but like the other people, like, like Perry White, Jimmy, like they're clueless, right? Oh wait, Clark's got glasses. He's not Superman. Come on. But like, I mean, this is why, Reeve did a great job with the character, right? He really kind of like physically changed himself to become this like nerdy Clark Kent versus this like, like specimen of a man in Superman. Um and that was believable. That was compelling. But you gotta make that more of a thing, because it can't just be glasses and like demeanor. Like Henry Cavill, no one, no one's gonna. There's nothing you can. There's no like amount of makeup and like CGI you can do to Henry Cavill to not make you realize like that's Henry Cavill, right? It's pretty like, so if like if a 2-year-old can tell like, hey, that's Henry Cavill and that's not Henry Cavill, like a 2-year-old can tell that, then um, again, that's what's awesome about Superman. You live in this like universe where like Clark Kent and Superman are two different people, and he gets everybody to believe that, and that in itself is I guess a superpower there. So maybe a magnetism, power of magnetism, or something going on there. But anyway, this was fun. This video's gone long. I said I'm putting out like 2-3 hour videos now, but uh, I'm glad to hear you say that. Uh, I gotta admit, like I don't think they need to do make Lois Korean. I'm glad they did. I'm glad they did. I don't think they needed to do it. They could have represented Koreans in different ways. They didn't have to like change such a legacy character like that. And I can honestly see why, because I think I have the same problem. If you were gonna say Superman's Korean, like for K is not for Krypton, K is for Korea, or something along those lines, or like Krypton is just a race of advanced Asians or something. Like if you had proposed that, or if you brought an Asian to the character on screen, I think I'd have a pro. I mean, nothing wrong with a biracial Superman, because like who was it? Dean Cain. He's biracial, right? He's half Japanese. Who else? There was another. Maybe I'm thinking mistaken, but anyway, like there've been biracial Lana Lang's a great example. Kristen Crook, right? She played Lana Lang. She was, I think she's a quarter Chinese, right? She's part Asian. But the thing is, Lana in the story, Lana Lang is white. But I remember Kristen Crook saying in a video later, like it would have been nice to maybe change, like represent Kristen Crook's heritage into the character, and made her parents like, like from multicultural background. Like there's nothing wrong with that. So I think, ultimately a part of me says, oh, you didn't have to really do anything to Lois, but a part of me is glad, like, they, that they're adding more diversity to these characters. I think it just ultimately makes a more compelling, realistic story. If Superman's adoptive family, the people that he's, protecting, the people that he cares about around him, aren't all white, that they're multiracial, that they're a reflection of America's diversity. I think that ultimately is just one of the things that makes Superman great, right? So whether it's Lois Lane or whether it's other characters, I just hope they do add more diversity to the legacy. We're talking about Superman legacy. Superman legacy has to have, like let's see a black Perry White. Let's see Latino. Let's see a Jaime Olsen. Like, well, what's wrong with all that kind of stuff? I think it'll just make. This is the thing. Characters comic book characters, comic book stories, they're always undergoing change. They're always evolving and they're always changing. So if it's changing to reflect who we are as a society, who we are as people, it's great. It should be something we welcome. Um, what's up, Simon? My Australian bro. Sorry about your cat, man. I watched that video and I really felt for your loss. So hope you're doing better. Yeah, super. Again, it's not rocket science with Superman. We just want to see him flying around at super speeds, using his heat vision, using his X-ray vision, using his super breath, and just solving, like saving people and solving things, solving issues. And which I think like him tackling climate change, like that. Imagine like what we went through this year, right? We had a fire in Hawaii. We had a 3 month heat wave. Like actually, past couple of years, we've had like triple digit heat waves in Texas that where lives are being taken, right? We have a hurricane in Florida that just hit and caused all kinds of destruction and damage. We have, uh, I mean, droughts. We have forest wildfire. I mean, just all kinds of things going on right now in the U.S. If we had Superman, none of these things would be an issue, right? He could combat all of that stuff. How cool would it be just like 2 hours of him fighting fires and saving little kids? Um, I'd pay $6 to watch that. What is it? What are movie prices these days? $20. Yeah, African American Pete. That's a great point. That was a great show. I love Smallville. Um, yeah, again, I think Gunn, he has the right approach. It all comes down to, I think the title of the movie says everything. And that's what gives me hope about the Gunn approach is like Superman Legacy. Legacy. He's got the longest legacy of any character in in human culture. Okay, 80 years. I mean, aside from like maybe Robin Hood, uh, Heckle, Doctor Heckle, and what is it, Doctor Heckle and Mister Hyde, um, I mean, aside from sort of these like classic literature characters who we have to study about, I'm talking about the longest legacy character of in comic books. Although you can make an argument for certain golden age, like the characters that are still around today, like I guess the Phantom isn't still around, but I'm sure there are a couple that have. Well, actually, no. Superman is the oldest costumed superhero character, but I'm just saying, like how many like literary characters have uh, have a history where they're relevant over 80 years. I mean, you have to go back a long time. I guess classic literature characters, they're still relevant to some extent because you have to study them, like Romeo and Juliet. And I mean, they're not really heroes; they're just characters, right? They're not heroes. Um, but I'm just trying to think of like there's not all that many, right? So legacy. What is that? Gunn is going to ask the question. He's going to propose a question to the audience, right? What is legacy to you? What is it? Longevity? What's what? You know, is it really this? Is it the a connection with a story? You know, um, a, cl- a so a story where a character overcomes uh, a challenge based on values that you have that you share with. So it's a reflection of the value system that gets that character out of whatever dilemma that they're in, right? And what is that value system? So that legacy. So it answers a series of questions, but ultimately, where will that answer be? And I think again, going back to what I think Superman's legacy or that movie should be about will be uh, it has to be it has to be contemporary, kind of what America is struggling with right now. And if we look at what America is struggling with right now, it's um, it's a challenge to its power, right? Uh, China is presenting a real challenge to its economic strength, its technological strength. It's really thrown a wrench in the economic engine of America and that displacement. So there's this sort of displacement now. Maybe China and U.S. will resolve their issues and they'll continue to be partners. But I think we've moved past that, right? The America really views China as an adversary now. So we're past that point. Now it's just a race to like who's going to come out on top, and it's an economic race, right? So we're caught. We're in this contemporary like here's that could very well translate into this movie. Like there's a Superman is being displaced as his legacy is being displaced by something where he no longer has the ability to be the superhero or the strength that people need. That's great. And how does he overcome that, right? So I mean, that's contemporary right there. Like you can bring that in and because that's what's being challenged and that's what's I think everybody all the minds in the country right now are really focused around the threat of China and how do we counter it and how do we come out of this stronger with a clear path on economic growth and uh, continue to maintain sort of uh, political power, influence on the rest of the world. Because once that power shift, once other once other countries buy into that power shift, that's when America's real um, economic power diminishes. Uh, and you're seeing like hints of that. You're seeing like you know the fact that you see all these countries going through economic struggles, political struggles, and you see uh, more sort of totalitarian regimes taking root in the third world. So it's a very real and sort of disconcerting uh, commentary on what's happening in the United States. So um, I think that legacy question is really has to do with will America recognize what's going on and evolve and meet the challenges and that's where you can have that translate into the Superman story. Superman's going to be like, hey, you throw this at me, here's how I'm going to I'm gonna fix it and solve it, and continue to be, you know, represent the ideals that I embody. So um, there's a lot of pressure on Gunn to do. I mean, that first film has got to hit it out of the park. It's got to be Superman Legacy, and this is my just gut honest take. It's got to have uh, a huge opening, and it's got to, you know, it's got to be just a multi-billion-dollar uh, like venture. Like it's got to kind of resurrect everything and be a huge commercial success. Um, otherwise, it's a real. I mean, I think it's going to go to show you uh, just how much trouble DC's in. DC's in a lot of trouble. If this Superman movie fails, and they've invested all this thought and time and effort into uh, really I mean, you're going to see them spend so much on marketing, PR, and pumping up this movie, hyping it up. I mean, it's going to be larger than life in terms of the promotional aspect prior to the release, because they want to get people excited for the movie. I think they did a good job with casting, because they got a really good looking Superman, and it doesn't hurt your chances if you've got a really good Superman. All right, Damien, thanks for hanging out. Um, and I'm gonna read all the things you recommended. So just give me some time. Um, but yeah, I mean, I've been ranting on long enough. But for me, I think they should stick to the formula. They should create. They should make an analogous connection with what's currently going on in the U.S., the issues that the U.S. is dealing with, and this. I know it's kind of cliche to keep harping on, like, you know we're 2020, right? I mean, we've supposedly have improved uh, the equality, the equity of our society, right? um, but have we really? I think in terms of, like, what corporations want you to believe, right? Corporations want you to believe, oh, you live in this equitable system, everybody's free to do what they want, they've got all the rights and privileges. It's really just how much work and what how you apply yourself. But that's not true, right? That's not the world we live in. But that's the image that I think most leaders and especially the corporate marketing world wants you to believe. They want you to believe you live in this diverse, great sort of melting pot where everybody's getting along. There are no racial issues. There's no racism. There's no, like, poverty. There's no, social inequity, which is complete bullshit. Um, but it's has to, like, there's got to be a way to, like, that's the current state of the U.S. So I hope DC's not going to go. They're not going to take that political angle. But if they did, they'd have a very compelling and I think um, contemporary story to tell there. Like, you know, and not something like, not something like where it's like a police shooting or something along those lines, but just really examining race relations, or there's just so much you could tackle so many themes in a movie as big and broad as Superman. So I hope they do. I just hope they take a real thoughtful and smart approach to it, and not such a Hollywood approach to where they, if they want to make a popcorn flick and it be completely like, you know, it be sort of a non-controversial, just bring about an alien, invader, and Superman, carrying the American flag, defeats that alien invader, and then everything's honky dory. If it's that, then fine. Just hope they do it with some good CGI and a big budget. It should work. It's worked for every other commercial hit. But I'm just saying, if James Gunn, that's what I appreciate about James Gunn. He's smart, and he understands good dialogue, good writing, and I just hope he just doesn't. He's not trying to make Superman like Guardians of the Galaxy, or what's the other one he did? The was it Doom Patrol? Or no, Suicide Squad. He tried to do a suicide. I hope it's not a Suicide Squad kind of thing where it's like a team movie and people are just cracking jokes and stuff. Like, if it's that, then it's gonna bomb. It's gonna bomb. If it's a standalone Superman story, maybe it's even a rehashing of the origin story or whatever. No one cares. If you do it, just stick to the formula, man. Tell the origin story, develop the characters, and then put them in a just a crisis situation. Boom, moneymaker. That's gonna bring in the billions. But don't try to derive that formula. And again, you can make it contemporary. You can tell a story about America. Tell a a revealing story about what we're struggling with as Americans. It can be economic, it can be political, whatever you want to do, just make it relevant to most Americans and have Superman fix it. There's your movie right there. And with that, I'm going to say goodnight. I got to pick up my family tomorrow. I meant to get to bed early tonight, but thanks for watching, guys. Those are our top 10 favorite artists. Those are also reviews of some of the books I've read. And again, I'm taking a big step back from comic books, so this is the last time you're going to probably see or hear from me in a while. It's not you, it's me. I'm just going to kind of focus on some of the more important things. I will continue to maybe read books and pick up books here and there, but for the most part, not going to do anything hobby related for a while. So again, thanks for watching. I'll be putting out shorts, so continue to follow and like and watch the short videos, but probably won't see any live content for some time. All right, Simon, have a great day. Let me know if you want to have me on your show, or you want to come on and do something together. Let me know. I'm always down. And I want to talk DC rather than Marvel if possible. So, but anyway, have a good night, everyone. Peace out.